I left my boring husband for a man who made me feel alive. 6 months later, I found his journal and realized what I threw away. My ex husband Daniel and I were married for 6 years. We met in our mid 20s through mutual friends, and everything about our relationship was easy. He was calm and steady and reliable. He worked as an accountant and came home at the same time every day. We ate dinner together every night and watched shows on the couch and went to bed at the same time. Our weekends were quiet, farmers markets and bookstores and cooking together. He would read while I scrolled on my phone, and sometimes we wouldn't talk for hours, but we were always in the same room. I used to find comfort in that. Around year 4, I started feeling like something was missing. My coworkers talked about their exciting weekends and spontaneous trips and passionate fights with their partners, and I had nothing to contribute. Daniel and I never fought. We never raised our voices. Everything was calm all the time, and I started to resent him for it. I convinced myself that calm meant he didn't care, that steady meant he wasn't passionate about me. I wanted fireworks and intensity and someone who would fight for me even if it meant fighting with me. Then I met Ryan at a work conference. He was the opposite of Daniel in every single way, loud and spontaneous and unpredictable. He made me feel things I hadn't felt in years. My heart would race when I saw his name on my phone. I started comparing everything Daniel did to him. Daniel's quiet. I love you in the morning became boring. Ryan's random text telling me he couldn't stop thinking about me became exciting. I started picking fights with Daniel just to see if he would react. He never did. He would just ask what was wrong and how he could help, and that made me even angrier. I wanted him to yell at me. I wanted proof that he cared enough to be jealous or angry or anything other than calm. When I told him I wanted a divorce, he didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just sat there for a long time and asked if there was anything he could do to change my mind. I said no. He asked if there was someone else. I lied and said no. He nodded and said okay. That was it. No fight, no begging. I took that as confirmation that he didn't care enough to try. The divorce was quick and painless. He only asked for a few things that belonged to his late mother. I moved in with Ryan 2 weeks after the papers were signed. For the first few months, it was everything I wanted. Passion and intensity and spontaneity. We stayed out until 3 in the morning and argued about stupid things and made up dramatically. I felt alive for the first time in years. Then the excitement became exhausting. The spontaneity meant I never knew if he would show up when he said he would. The intensity meant small disagreements became screaming matches that left me drained. I started missing the quiet dinners and predictable evenings, and the calm presence of someone who was just there. Last month, I went back to my old house to get some boxes from the garage. Daniel wasn't home, so I let myself in with the key I still had. The house looked the same, but emptier. I grabbed my things and was about to leave when I saw a notebook on the kitchen counter. I opened it even though I knew I shouldn't. It was a journal Daniel never once mentioned during our entire marriage. I flipped to a page from 3 years ago. He wrote about loving to watch me read on the couch even when I didn't notice. He wrote about memorizing how I take my coffee so he could make it every morning without asking. He wrote about being scared he wasn't exciting enough, and secretly planning a trip to Paris for our anniversary, because he wanted to see my face light up again. I flipped to the week I asked for divorce. He wrote that he knew something was wrong for months but didn't know how to fix it. He wrote that he thought about fighting for me but didn't want to trap me in a marriage that made me unhappy. He wrote that letting me go was the hardest thing he ever did, but he loved me enough to want me happy even if it wasn't with him. I sat on his kitchen floor and cried for 2 hours. I cried for the man who loved me quietly while I called him boring. I cried for the marriage I threw away chasing chaos disguised as passion. I finally understood Daniel did fight for me. He fought by waking up every single day and choosing to love me even when I made it impossible. I drove back to Ryan's apartment. He wasn't home. He didn't tell me where he went. I sat alone in the dark and realized the life I wanted was the one I already had. I texted Daniel that night and asked if we could talk. He responded 3 days later with one word: number. I sat in Ryan's apartment staring at my phone where Daniel's single word glowed on the screen. Number. Just that. 3 days of waiting for 2 letters that felt like a door slamming in my face. The rejection settled in my chest like something heavy and deserved. Ryan still wasn't home. I'd called twice and texted once asking where he went but got nothing back. 3 months ago, that would have felt exciting and mysterious, like he was too busy living life to check his phone. Now it just felt disrespectful. Now it felt like proof that I'd traded someone who always answered for someone who couldn't be bothered. I tried to sleep that night but couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's handwriting describing how he memorized the way I take my coffee. 2 sugars and just enough cream to turn it light brown. He made it perfect every single morning for 6 years, and I never once thanked him, because I thought that's just what people did. Ryan doesn't even know if I prefer coffee or tea. I realized lying there in the dark that I've never actually told him because he's never asked. Not once in 6 months has he asked me what I like or how I take things or what matters to me. I got up and made myself coffee at 2 in the morning and put in 2 sugars and cream and cried into the cup. The next morning, I called in sick to work because I couldn't stop crying. My boss sounded annoyed, but I didn't care. I sat on the couch in the same clothes I'd worn yesterday and stared at my phone and waited for Ryan to come home. He finally showed up at noon looking tired and smelling like cigarettes and something else I couldn't place. He seemed annoyed that I was still there. He said he crashed at a friend's place after the bars closed around 3. I asked why he didn't text me, and he looked at me like I was being crazy. He said he didn't think it was a big deal and he doesn't have to check in like some kid with a curfew. I asked which friend, and he said I wouldn't know them and went to take a shower. I spent the day rereading Daniel's journal entries on my phone where I'd photographed every page. I know I shouldn't torture myself, but I couldn't stop. One entry from our 4th anniversary made me physically sick. He wrote about spending weeks planning a surprise weekend trip to the vineyard where we had our first date. He called around to find the exact table where we sat that day. He booked the same room at the bed and breakfast. He wrote about wanting to see my face light up again like it did when we first met. I never went on that trip. I asked for the divorce 2 weeks before our anniversary. He never mentioned any of it. He just let it all go and probably lost the deposits and never said a word. Ryan found me crying on the couch later that afternoon and asked what was wrong. I tried to explain about the journal and what I'd found and how I was realizing what I'd thrown away. He cut me off halfway through to complain about his own day. His boss was being difficult. His friend owed him money. The bartender last night was slow. I sat there listening to him talk and realized we've been together 6 months, and he's never once asked me a question about my marriage. He doesn't know how long Daniel and I were together. He doesn't know why it ended beyond what I told him at the start. He's never asked about my life before him because he doesn't actually care about anything that doesn't involve him directly. I waited until the next day and called Arno from work. He's the only friend who stayed neutral during the divorce and didn't take sides. Everyone else chose Daniel or chose me and stopped talking to whoever they didn't choose. Arno just said he loved us both and hoped we'd figure things out. I asked if he could meet me for coffee after his shift, and he said yes immediately. I felt grateful to have someone who would listen without judgment or telling me I told you so, even though I deserved both. Arno met me at the coffee shop near his office at 6. I told him the whole story about going back to the house and finding the journal and reading Daniel's words and realizing what I'd done. I showed him some of the entries I'd photographed and watched his face while he read them. He handed my phone back and said I'd been talking about Daniel for an hour, but hadn't mentioned Ryan once except to say where I was living. He asked me gently if I left my husband, or if I just ran away from myself. That question haunted me for days. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus at work. I kept thinking about what Arno said and realizing he was right. I blamed Daniel for my own restlessness and dissatisfaction with my life. He was never boring. I was bored with myself. I was unhappy with who I was and what I was doing. And instead of dealing with that, I made it his fault. It was easier to project everything onto someone who wouldn't fight back. Someone who would just ask what was wrong and how he could help. I punished him for being stable when the real problem was that I couldn't stand my own company. I tried to talk to Ryan about our relationship and where it was going. I waited until he was in a good mood and suggested we sit down and have a real conversation. He deflected immediately by saying we should go out and do something fun instead of having a heavy talk. I pressed the issue and said I really needed to discuss some things. He got annoyed and accused me of being too serious and killing the vibe we used to have. He said I'd changed since we moved in together and I wasn't fun anymore. I pointed out that wanting to communicate isn't being serious. It's being an adult. He rolled his eyes and left the apartment. I started noticing things about Ryan I'd been ignoring in the excitement of something new. How he interrupts me constantly when I'm talking. How he never remembers things I tell him about my day. How every plan we make revolves around what he wants to do and where he wants to go. The spontaneity I found so attractive was really just him refusing to consider anyone else's schedule or preferences. He doesn't plan things because planning would mean thinking about someone other than himself. He doesn't ask about my day because he genuinely doesn't care. The intensity I craved wasn't passion. It was just selfishness loud enough that I mistook it for something real. I throw myself into work because it's the only place where my brain stops replaying Daniel's journal entries on a loop. My desk becomes a fortress where I can hide behind spreadsheets and project timelines and pretend my personal life isn't falling apart. I arrive early and stay late and volunteer for extra assignments because being busy means not thinking. My boss Sarah stops by my desk one afternoon and asks if everything is okay because I've been unusually quiet during team meetings. I force a smile and tell her I'm fine, just focused on getting through the quarterly reports. She looks at me like she doesn't quite believe it, but she nods and says to let her know if I need anything. I can't tell her the truth because admitting what I did feels impossible. How do I explain that I destroyed a good marriage chasing something that turned out to be nothing? 2 weeks drag by and I can't stop thinking about Daniel. I tell myself not to call him again, but one morning I wake up and grab my phone before I can talk myself out of it. I dial his number and wait for it to ring, but it goes straight to voicemail without even connecting. I try again thinking maybe it's a network issue, but same result. The realization hits me hard and sudden. He blocked my number. He actually blocked me. My hands start shaking so badly I drop my phone on the floor. The finality of it makes my stomach turn, and I have to run to the bathroom where I dry heave over the toilet for 5 minutes. I can't catch my breath and my chest feels tight, and I realize this is what panic feels like. I splash cold water on my face and look at myself in the mirror and barely recognize the person staring back. I text Sarah that I'm sick and need to leave early. She responds immediately telling me to feel better and not to worry about the afternoon meeting. I drive home in a daze and crawl into bed even though it's only 2 in the afternoon. Ryan announces on Wednesday that he's going on a weekend trip with some friends from college. He doesn't ask if I want to come or if I have plans. He just tells me he's leaving Friday morning and will be back Sunday night. I remind him that I have a huge presentation Monday morning that I've been preparing for weeks, and I really can't just take off. He shrugs and says that's fine. He wasn't really inviting me anyway because it's a guy's thing. I ask where they're going and he's vague about it, just says somewhere upstate. Friday comes and he leaves without saying goodbye because I'm already at work. I spend the weekend preparing my presentation and trying not to feel pathetic about being alone. Saturday afternoon, I make the mistake of checking social media and see Ryan posted photos from a bar. He's with a group of people I've never seen before, and half of them are women. There's one woman in particular who shows up in every single shot with her arm around his shoulders or her hand on his back. The caption says something about old friends and good times. I stare at the photos until my vision blurs and I feel sick again. I close my laptop and walk to the bedroom where I keep a box of old photos shoved under the bed. I haven't looked at these since I moved in with Ryan because it hurt too much. I pull out the box and sit on the floor going through pictures from my marriage. There's one from our 3rd anniversary dinner where Daniel is smiling at me instead of at the camera. His expression is so peaceful and content that it makes my chest ache. I used to think that smile meant he was bored or checked out. Now I see it for what it was. He was happy. He was genuinely happy just being there with me. I find another photo from a farmer's market, both of us holding bags of vegetables and grinning like idiots. I remember that day. We spent 2 hours wandering through the stalls and then went home and cooked together, and it was perfect. But at the time, I convinced myself it was boring. I told myself that exciting couples didn't spend Saturday mornings buying produce. I flip through more photos and see the same thing over and over. Daniel's calm presence that I mistook for lack of passion. His steady reliability that I interpreted as him not caring enough to fight. I was so wrong about everything. Monday after work, I meet Arno at the coffee shop near his office. I've been texting him updates about the Ryan situation and the blocked number and everything falling apart. He listens while I explain about the weekend photos and how I spent 2 days alone looking at old pictures. He's quiet for a long time after I finish talking, and then he says something that catches me off guard. He suggests I should talk to a therapist because he's worried about how much I'm struggling, and he thinks I need professional help processing all of this. I want to be defensive, but he's right. I can't handle this on my own, and talking to friends isn't enough. I need someone objective who can help me understand why I made the choices I did. That night, I log into my insurance website and search for therapists in my area. I find one named Charlotte Dubois who specializes in relationship issues and life transitions. Her first available appointment is next Thursday at 6. I book it before I can change my mind. Ryan gets back Sunday night and acts like nothing happened. He walks in the door, drops his bag on the floor, and immediately starts talking about how great the trip was. He doesn't ask about my presentation or how my weekend went or if I'm okay. I wait until he finally pauses for breath, and then I ask about the woman in all his photos. He looks genuinely confused, like he can't understand why I would even bring it up. He says that's just Anna. She's been friends with the group since college, and I'm being weird about it. I point out that she had her hands all over him in every single picture, and he rolls his eyes. He says I'm being jealous and controlling, and he thought I was cooler than this. The word controlling makes me want to laugh because it's so backwards. I left Daniel partly because I wanted him to show jealousy, to care enough to be possessive sometimes. Now Ryan is accusing me of the exact thing I once craved. I don't have the energy to fight about it, so I just walk away. Thursday comes and I drive to Charlotte's office after work. The waiting room is small and quiet, with magazines nobody ever reads, and a white noise machine humming in the corner. Charlotte comes out to get me, and she's younger than I expected. Maybe early 40s with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her office is comfortable in that deliberately calming way therapist offices always are. She asks me to tell her what brought me here, and I start talking about the journal. Once I start, I can't stop. I tell her everything. The divorce and Ryan and going back to the house and reading Daniel's words and realizing what I threw away. I tell her about the blocked number and the weekend photos and how I feel like I'm drowning. Saying it all out loud makes it real in a way that thinking about it didn't. When I'm done talking, I feel exhausted and raw. Charlotte doesn't offer easy answers or tell me what to do. Instead, she asks questions that make me think about things I've been avoiding. She asks why I believe Daniel didn't care when he showed up for me every single day. She asks what I was really looking for when I started the affair with Ryan. She asks if I've ever been comfortable with peace and stability, or if I always need chaos to feel alive. The questions follow me home and keep me up that night. I start recognizing patterns I never saw before. I've been chasing feelings instead of building something real. I confused emotional chaos for depth and mistook stability for shallowness. The intensity with Ryan felt like passion, but it was really just drama disguised as connection. Daniel's calm presence felt boring, but it was actually the foundation of something solid. Charlotte asks during our second session what I actually want from a relationship, and I realize with horror that I don't know anymore. I thought I wanted fireworks and spontaneity and someone who would fight with me. But now I see that what I really want is someone who shows up consistently and remembers how I take my coffee and plans surprises weeks in advance because they want to see me smile. I want what I already had and destroyed. Ryan stays out all night on a Tuesday without texting me once. I don't hear from him until he walks in Wednesday afternoon smelling like beer and someone else's perfume. I'm past the point of being hurt or angry. I just feel tired. I ask him calmly if he can please text me when he's going to stay out all night because I worry when I don't hear from him. He explodes immediately. He says I'm trying to change him into someone boring and predictable and he's not going to let me control his life. I hear myself defending basic communication as a relationship necessity, and I realize how low my standards have fallen. I'm literally asking for the bare minimum, for him to send a text letting me know he's alive and he's treating it like I'm demanding he check in every hour. This is our worst fight yet, and it ends with him storming out again. As I sit on the couch in the empty apartment and understand with complete clarity that this relationship is over. I'm just too afraid to admit it out loud yet. My phone rings Friday morning while I'm getting ready for work. I don't recognize the number, but I answer anyway. A woman's voice says my name and asks if I have time to talk. I ask who this is, and she says Eloise Morel, Daniel's older sister. My stomach drops so fast I have to sit down on the edge of the bed. Heloise and I were never close during the marriage, but we were always polite at family gatherings. I assume she's calling to yell at me for what I did to her brother, and I can't blame her. But her voice is calm, almost gentle. She asks if we can meet for coffee sometime this week. I'm too curious and too desperate for any connection to Daniel to say no. We agree to meet Saturday morning at a cafe downtown. I show up at the coffee shop 15 minutes early on Saturday morning because I'm too nervous to wait at home. The place is small and quiet with exposed brick walls and mismatched furniture that probably costs more than it looks like it should. I order a tea I don't want just to have something to do with my hands and sit at a table near the back where I can see the door. Every time someone walks in, my stomach drops, but it's never her. I check my phone 3 times even though only 5 minutes have passed. I'm about to text and ask if she's still coming when the door opens and Eloise walks in. She looks exactly like I remember from family dinners, except maybe a little older around the eyes. She spots me right away and waves, then goes to the counter to order before coming over. She sits down across from me and smiles in a way that seems genuinely kind, and I immediately feel like I'm going to cry. She says Daniel told her about my text and his response, and she wanted to check on me because she knows finding that journal must have been devastating. The fact that she's being nice to me when she has every right to be angry makes something break open in my chest. I start crying right there in the middle of the coffee shop and I can't stop. She hands me napkins from the dispenser on the table and doesn't say anything while I try to pull myself together. Other people are looking at us, but Heloise doesn't seem to care. When I can finally talk, I apologize for falling apart, and she waves it off like it's nothing. She tells me Daniel is doing okay, that he's been seeing someone casually for a few months and is focusing on himself and his hobbies. The words hit me harder than they should because I knew he would move on eventually, but hearing it confirmed makes it real. She says he's taken up woodworking and goes hiking most weekends and has joined some kind of book club through the library. He sounds happy and stable and like he's building a life that has nothing to do with me. I should feel happy for him, but instead I feel like I'm losing him all over again. Like the door that was already closed just got locked from the inside. Heloise must see something on my face because she reaches across the table and puts her hand over mine. She says gently that Daniel loved me completely, that anyone who read that journal would know that, but he's not the same person he was during our marriage. She explains that losing me changed him in ways both good and difficult, that he's learned to set boundaries and protect himself, which is why he said no to talking. She's not trying to be cruel. She's just being honest, and somehow that makes it worse. I ask if she thinks he'll ever be willing to hear me apologize, and she's quiet for a long moment. Finally, she says honestly she doesn't know, but then she adds something that stops me cold. She says I shouldn't apologize to make myself feel better, that apologizing is supposed to be for the person you hurt, not for your own relief. She suggests I focus on understanding why I made the choices I did instead of seeking absolution from the person I hurt. The words settle over me like a weight because I realize she's right. I've been so desperate to tell Daniel I'm sorry because I want to feel less guilty, not because it would actually help him. We sit there for another hour and she tells me stories about Daniel as a kid, how he was always the calm one even when their parents were fighting, how he learned early to keep his feelings quiet. She says she used to worry he would end up with someone who took advantage of his steadiness, and when he married me she thought maybe she was wrong. Then she stops talking and just looks at me and I know what she's not saying. That conversation with Heloise shifts something in me because I realize I've been so focused on losing Daniel that I haven't actually examined the person I was when I was married to him. I go to see Charlotte 2 days later, and for the first time I'm not talking about Daniel, I'm talking about me. Charlotte helps me explore the deeper dissatisfaction I was feeling and why I blamed it on my marriage instead of addressing it directly. She asks what I was like before I met Daniel, and I realize I don't really know, because I've always defined myself through relationships. I jump from one person to the next without ever sitting still long enough to figure out who I am on my own. Charlotte writes something down and asks if I notice a pattern, and suddenly I do. I start recognizing patterns from before I even met Daniel. Things I've been doing my whole adult life without seeing them clearly. I've always gotten restless when things are going well, always created chaos when life feels too stable, always mistaken intensity for intimacy. The fights with Ryan that felt passionate at first were really just me recreating familiar dysfunction, because peace makes me uncomfortable. This isn't about Daniel at all. It's about me never learning to be at peace, never developing the ability to sit with contentment without sabotaging it. Charlotte asks why I think that is, and I don't have an answer yet, but at least now I'm asking the right questions. Ryan senses I'm pulling away emotionally, even though I haven't said anything. He responds by being extra attentive for about 3 days, texting me throughout the day and asking how I'm doing and suggesting we cook dinner together. For those 3 days, I almost convinced myself things could work, that maybe he's capable of being the partner I need. Then on the 4th day, he reverts to his usual self and disappears for an entire evening without explanation. The temporary effort just highlights how little genuine care exists between us, compared to what I had with Daniel. Daniel showed up consistently every single day for 6 years. Ryan can barely manage 3 days of basic consideration before getting bored and checking out. I find myself doing small things that Daniel used to do without even thinking about it. I make my coffee the exact way I like it, measuring out the cream and sugar precisely instead of just dumping things in. I start reading in the evening instead of scrolling my phone, actual books with pages that I have to turn. I go to the farmer's market on Saturday morning and buy fresh vegetables even though it would be easier to just go to the regular grocery store. These quiet rituals I once found boring now feel like coming home to myself, like I'm remembering who I was before I convinced myself I needed constant excitement to feel alive. Charlotte asks during our next session what I'm getting from my relationship with Ryan, and I have to really think about it. The honest answer is distraction from my own guilt and self-hatred. I'm staying because leaving would mean admitting I destroyed my marriage for nothing, but staying is destroying what's left of my self-respect. Every day I stay with someone who treats me like an option instead of a priority. I'm proving to myself that I don't deserve better. Charlotte doesn't tell me what to do, but she asks what I would tell a friend in my situation, and I know the answer immediately. Arno takes me out for my birthday the following week because he knows Ryan won't remember. We go to a nice restaurant and he orders a bottle of wine, and halfway through dinner he asks if I'm happy. Not just busy or distracted or entertained, but genuinely content. I open my mouth to say yes, but I can't because it would be a lie. I can't answer him because I can't remember the last time I felt actual happiness instead of just temporary excitement or relief from anxiety. Arno doesn't push, but he holds my hand across the table and says, I deserve to be happy, really happy, and staying in a relationship that makes me miserable isn't going to fix what I'm running from. I know he's right, but knowing something and being ready to act on it are two different things. I wake up on my birthday morning and Ryan's already gone. No note on the counter, no text message, nothing to show he remembered what day it is. I mentioned it at least 3 times this week, casual comments about turning another year older, but he just nodded and kept scrolling through his phone. I make myself coffee and sit at the kitchen table waiting for something, a text or a call or him to walk through the door with flowers, but my phone stays silent. By noon, I'm angry at myself for expecting anything different. Daniel used to start planning my birthday weeks in advance, dropping hints about surprises and making sure the day felt special without me having to ask for it. Ryan comes home around 3 in the afternoon and I ask if he knows what today is. He looks confused for a second, then shrugs and says he forgot. When I tell him I'm hurt that he didn't remember my birthday even though I mentioned it multiple times, he gets defensive and says birthdays aren't a big deal, and I'm being materialistic for expecting him to celebrate. The words hit me wrong because it's not about gifts or money. It's about him caring enough to remember something important to me. I go to the bedroom and close the door because I don't want to fight about this. I don't want to have to explain why basic consideration matters. My therapy session with Charlotte the next week feels different because I'm finally ready to be honest. She asks me the same question she's been asking for weeks in different ways. What advice would I give a friend in my situation? I open my mouth to deflect like I usually do, but instead I hear myself say, I'd tell her to leave immediately. I'd tell her she deserves basic respect and consideration, and that someone who forgets her birthday after she mentions it multiple times doesn't care about her. Charlotte waits quietly while I process what I just said. I realize I've been unable to apply that same wisdom to myself, because leaving Ryan means admitting I destroyed my marriage for nothing. It means facing the fact that I traded a man who loved me completely for someone who can't remember my birthday. The clarity hurts worse than the confusion did. Charlotte asks what's stopping me from taking my own advice, and I don't have a good answer. Just fear and guilt and shame that I let things get this bad. That night, I tell Ryan we need to talk seriously about our relationship. He's on the couch playing video games, and he doesn't pause when I sit down. I wait until he dies in whatever game he's playing, and then I say, we can't keep going like this. He immediately gets defensive and says I've changed, that I've become negative and exhausting. I feel anger rising in my chest because I've barely asked him for anything. I point out that asking for basic communication and respect isn't negativity, that wanting my boyfriend to remember my birthday isn't being demanding. He puts down the controller and looks at me like I'm being unreasonable. He says maybe we want different things, and there's this challenge in his voice like he expects me to back down and apologize for bringing it up. For the first time, I agree with him completely. I say yes, we do want different things, and I'm done pretending that excitement and chaos are substitutes for actual partnership. I tell him I need someone who shows up consistently, who remembers important things, who treats me like a priority instead of an option. He seems shocked that I'm the one ending it. His face goes blank for a second, and then he asks if I'm serious. I tell him I've never been more serious about anything. He expected me to keep chasing him forever, to keep accepting the bare minimum while he did whatever he wanted. The look on his face when he realizes I'm actually leaving is almost satisfying, but mostly I just feel tired and sad that it took me this long. Ryan moves out within a week since the apartment was always more mine than his. He doesn't have much stuff, just clothes and his gaming equipment and some kitchen things he brought when we moved in together. I help him pack because sitting in silence while he does it alone feels worse somehow. He keeps making comments about how I'm going to regret this, how I'll realize I made a mistake and come back. I don't respond because there's no point arguing about it. When he carries the last box to his car, I feel this huge wave of relief wash over me. The apartment feels bigger and quieter without his energy filling up the space. Being alone is scary, but it's better than being with someone who makes me feel lonely. I lock the door behind him and sit on the couch in the silence and just breathe for the first time in months. I spend the first week after the breakup not trying to fix anything or jump into something new. I don't download dating apps or go out with friends or distract myself with work projects. I just sit with my own company and learn to be okay with quiet. The silence that used to terrify me now feels like space to finally think clearly. I wake up and make my coffee exactly how I like it. I read books in the evening instead of watching TV. I go to bed when I'm tired instead of staying up because someone else wants to. The small routines feel good in a way I forgot was possible. I'm not happy yet, but I'm not drowning either, and that feels like progress. Arno helps me move to a smaller apartment that I can afford on my own. The place I shared with Ryan was always too expensive for one person, and I don't want to stay somewhere that reminds me of my mistakes. The new apartment is smaller, but it has good light and it's in a quieter neighborhood. Arno carries boxes up 3 flights of stairs without complaining and helps me assemble furniture from the store. I pick out everything slowly and intentionally instead of just filling space with whatever's convenient. A blue couch because I like blue. A small dining table because I might want to have people over someday. Plants for the windowsill because taking care of something living feels important right now. The fresh start feels symbolic of rebuilding my life without running away from myself. Charlotte and I work on identifying my triggers for restlessness in our sessions. She helps me see the pattern of how I get uncomfortable when things are calm and stable, how I create problems when there aren't any real ones to solve. We develop healthier ways to handle dissatisfaction than blowing up my entire life. I'm learning that boredom is sometimes just peace, that my brain got trained to mistake drama for excitement and calm for apathy. When I feel restless now, I go for a run or call Arno or work on a puzzle instead of picking fights or making destructive choices. It's hard work, and I mess up sometimes, but I'm trying. Charlotte says that stability isn't the same as stagnation, and I'm starting to believe her. I write a letter to Daniel that I don't intend to send. Charlotte suggested it as a way to process everything I want to say without expecting anything from him. I sit down one night with a notebook and start writing, and I can't stop. The letter becomes dozens of pages of apology and understanding and grief for what I destroyed. I write about reading his journal and finally seeing how much he loved me. I write about all the ways I took him for granted and mistook his steadiness for indifference. I write about Ryan and how I thought chaos was passion until it nearly broke me. I write about learning to sit with quiet and realizing that Daniel was right all along about what matters. When I finish writing, my hand is cramping and my eyes are swollen from crying, but I feel lighter somehow. I fold up the pages and put them in a drawer. Maybe someday I'll send it or maybe I won't, but writing it helped me understand what I lost. 2 months after finding the journal, I see Daniel at the grocery store. I'm in the produce section trying to remember if I need onions when I look up, and he's standing near the tomatoes with a woman. She's pretty and laughing at something he said, and he looks happy and relaxed in a way I haven't seen in years. My stomach drops because I know this must be the person Eloise mentioned he's been seeing. I freeze with my hand on a bag of carrots and just watch them for a second. He picks up a tomato and shows it to her, and she nods and he puts it in their cart. It's such a small, normal thing, but it hurts to see him doing it with someone else. Then he sees me. His expression closes off immediately, and the easy smile disappears. We make eye contact across the produce section, and I can see him deciding what to do. He nods politely, just this small acknowledgement that I exist, and then turns away and keeps shopping. The woman doesn't seem to notice anything happened. I stand there holding my carrots while they walk toward the checkout, and I know I just saw my future. A life where Daniel is happy without me, and I have to learn to be okay with that. I drive home with tears running down my face and my hands shaking on the wheel. The image of Daniel looking happy with someone else keeps playing in my head over and over. I pull into my parking spot and just sit there crying for 20 minutes because seeing him move on makes everything feel so final. Part of me knew he would eventually, but watching it happen in real life is different from imagining it. When I finally go inside my apartment, I feel empty but also weirdly calm, like something clicked into place. I can't have him back, and I need to accept that instead of torturing myself with what-ifs. The grief is still there, but so is something else. This quiet understanding that his happiness doesn't erase what we had, even if I destroyed it. The next Saturday, I see a flyer at the coffee shop about volunteers needed at a community garden, and I take a photo of it on my phone. I need to do something with my weekends besides sitting around feeling sorry for myself. I show up the following week, and a woman with dirt under her fingernails hands me gloves and shows me how to prepare soil for planting. The work is slow and repetitive, turning earth and pulling weeds and watering seedlings that won't grow for weeks. I find myself thinking about Daniel while I work, how he used to tend the herbs on our kitchen windowsill with the same patient care. Growing things takes time and attention and consistency. All the things I used to dismiss as boring. I go back every weekend and my hands get calloused and my back aches, but watching tiny green shoots push through soil feels like proof that slow growth still counts as progress. Charlotte asks me during our next session if I've forgiven myself yet for what happened with Daniel. I sit there for a long time trying to figure out how to answer, because I'm not sure forgiveness is even the right word for what I did. Some mistakes feel too big to just forgive yourself and move on like nothing happened. I tell her I don't know if I should forgive myself, that maybe I need to carry this for a while longer. She leans forward and says something that surprises me, that understanding why I made those choices and learning from them matters more than beating myself up forever or letting myself off easy. She says guilt that leads to growth is useful, but guilt that just makes me hate myself helps nobody. I'm not sure I believe her yet, but I write it down in my journal to think about later. Heloise texts me out of nowhere one afternoon asking how I'm doing. I stare at the message for 10 minutes before responding because I still can't believe Daniel's sister wants anything to do with me. We text back and forth a few times and she tells me she knows I'm struggling with guilt about everything. She says something that makes me cry in the middle of the grocery store, that holding on to guilt forever doesn't honor what Daniel and I had together. She tells me the best apology isn't words. It's becoming someone who wouldn't make the same mistakes again. I thank her and tell her I don't deserve her kindness, but she just sends back a heart emoji. Having any connection to Daniel's family feels like more grace than I earned, but I'm trying to accept it instead of pushing it away. I look at myself in the mirror one morning while getting ready for work, and realize I'm different from I was 6 months ago when I left Daniel. My face looks the same, but something behind my eyes has changed. I'm not the person who thought excitement mattered more than stability anymore, but I'm also not yet the person I want to become. Changing patterns I've had my whole life is hard and uncomfortable, and some days I want to quit. I catch myself getting restless when things are calm, and I have to actively work on sitting with that feeling instead of creating chaos. Charlotte says growth isn't linear and I'll mess up sometimes, but what matters is that I keep trying. For the first time in my life, I'm committed to actually doing the work, instead of running away when it gets difficult. 3 months after finding Daniel's journal, I open my laptop and write him an email. I don't ask to meet or talk or get back together. I just tell him I understand now what I threw away, and I'm genuinely happy he's moving forward with his life. I write that I hope the woman I saw him with appreciates him the way I should have. I apologize for the hurt I caused without making excuses or asking him to forgive me. The whole email is maybe 6 sentences long. I read it 20 times before hitting send, and then I close my laptop and go for a walk. I don't expect a response, and when days pass without one, I'm not surprised. Sending it wasn't about getting something back. It was about being honest for once, instead of hiding behind excuses. My boss calls me into her office the following week, and I'm scared I'm in trouble, but instead she tells me they're promoting me. The new position has more responsibility and better pay, and involves managing a small team. I'm surprised by how excited I feel about the challenge instead of anxious. The restlessness I used to feel at work hasn't disappeared completely, but now I channel it into learning new skills and taking on harder projects. I used to think being satisfied with my job meant I was boring, but now I understand that finding meaning in work is actually valuable. I thank my boss and go back to my desk feeling proud of myself for the first time in months. Arno invites me to his book club the next Thursday, and I almost say no because it sounds like exactly the kind of thing I used to dismiss as boring. But I remember Daniel loved book clubs and quiet conversations about ideas, and I never gave those things a real chance. I show up at Arno's apartment where 6 people sit around talking about a novel I haven't read. They're nice about catching me up, and the conversation is smart and deep without anyone trying to show off or dominate. These people have real connections with each other built on shared interests and genuine care, not drama or intensity. I leave feeling like I actually enjoyed myself instead of just killing time. I go back the following month and the month after that, slowly building friendships based on the kind of quiet compatibility I used to think was worthless. I'm getting coffee one Saturday when I see the couple who introduced me and Daniel sitting at a corner table. They notice me at the same time and their faces get awkward and uncomfortable. I walk over before I can talk myself out of it and tell them honestly that I messed up my marriage and I'm working on being better. They relax a little and invite me to sit down, and we end up talking for an hour. They mention Daniel seems really happy lately and is doing well at work, and I tell them I'm genuinely glad to hear it. They seem surprised that I mean it, but I do. I want him to be happy, even if it's not with me. When we say goodbye, they hug me and tell me to take care of myself, and it feels like maybe I didn't burn every bridge after all. Charlotte and I talk about my patterns in relationships during our next session, and she helps me see something I've been avoiding. I was searching for outside validation and excitement because I didn't have a strong sense of who I was as a person. I used relationships to define me instead of building my own identity first. With Daniel, I was the wife of a steady, reliable man, and I resented him for it. With Ryan, I was the girlfriend of an exciting, unpredictable man, and I exhausted myself trying to keep up. Neither relationship was about actually knowing myself or what I wanted. Charlotte says the work now is developing that foundation I never had, Figuring out who I am when I'm alone before I try to be part of someone else's life. I'm scared because I'm 32 and just now learning things I should have figured out in my 20s, but she reminds me that starting late is better than never starting at all. I sign up for a pottery class at the community center the following week because I've always wanted to try it. Daniel used to say it was impractical when I mentioned it during our marriage, and Ryan would have laughed and called it boring old lady stuff. The class meets Thursday evenings in a small studio that smells like wet clay and dust. The teacher shows us how to center the clay on the wheel, and my first attempts are disasters. The clay wobbles and collapses, and I have to start over again and again. But there's something calming about the repetition, about learning to apply just the right amount of pressure at just the right time. By the third class, I managed to make a lopsided bowl that doesn't fall apart. I take it home and put it on my kitchen counter even though it's ugly and uneven. Creating something with my own hands through patience and practice feels like a metaphor for everything I'm trying to do with my life. I go back every week and slowly get better at centering the clay and pulling up the walls without them collapsing. 4 months after finding the journal, I meet Arno for dinner at a restaurant downtown. I park on the street and walk toward the entrance when I see Daniel's car in the lot. I stop walking and just stand there on the sidewalk staring at his old sedan with the dent in the back bumper from when I backed into a mailbox 3 years ago. He's inside that restaurant right now having dinner with someone, probably the woman from the grocery store. My first instinct is to go inside and manufacture some reason to talk to him, to insert myself into his evening and his life. But I don't. I turn around and text Arno that I need to reschedule, and I get back in my car and drive home. Sitting alone in my apartment, I feel this wave of acceptance that Daniel has a whole life now that doesn't include me and never will again. It hurts, but it's also okay somehow. He deserves to have dinner with someone who appreciates him without his ex-wife showing up and making it weird. I tell Charlotte about seeing Daniel's car at my next session, and she asks what I did. When I explain that I left without going in, she leans back in her chair and smiles a little. She points out that a few months ago, I would have gone inside and found some excuse to talk to him, that I would have convinced myself I had a right to know who he was with and what he was doing. But now I'm learning that love sometimes means leaving people alone to be happy without you. The words hit hard because they're true. I spent so long thinking love meant intensity and drama and fighting for someone, but real love is also knowing when to step back and let someone move on. Daniel choosing not to respond to my messages is him protecting himself and his healing, and the most loving thing I can do is respect that boundary, even though it's painful. Heloise texts me the next week asking if I want to get coffee, and I say yes. We meet at the same place as before, and she tells me Daniel knows she's been in contact with me. He's okay with it, she says. He doesn't hate me, but he's not ready for direct contact, and he might never be. I nod and stir my coffee and tell her I understand. Part of me had been hoping she would say he was softening or that maybe eventually he'd be willing to talk, but hearing the truth is actually better than holding on to false hope. I thank her for being kind enough to keep me updated when she has no reason to care about my feelings. She reaches across the table and squeezes my hand, and says she's seen how much I'm working on myself, and she respects that. Before we leave, I ask Heloise if she thinks Daniel read my email. She's quiet for a moment and then says yes, he read it, but he chose not to respond because answering would open a door he's worked hard to close. She reminds me that accepting his boundaries is the most loving thing I can do now, even though it hurts. I want to ask more questions, but I don't, because that would be using her as a way to stay connected to Daniel, and that's not fair to either of them. We hug goodbye and I drive home feeling sad, but also strangely at peace. I'm learning to sit with the grief of losing someone without trying to fix it or make it better or force resolution. The holidays approach and I spend them with my own family, instead of trying to insert myself into Daniel's life through Heloise or mutual friends. My parents live 2 hours away and I drive there for Thanksgiving. My mom notices right away that I seem different. She says I'm more present, more grounded, less distracted by my phone or whatever drama was always happening in my life. We cook together and talk about real things instead of surface-level small talk. My dad asks how I'm doing, and I give him an honest answer instead of a fake cheerful one. On my last day there, my mom hugs me in the kitchen and says she's proud of the work I'm doing on myself. I cry a little because I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that. I write in a journal now, something I never did before. Every night before bed, I sit down and write honestly about my feelings and patterns and the things I'm learning in therapy. Some entries are about Daniel and the marriage I destroyed. Others are about Ryan and how I confused chaos with connection. More and more lately, they're about me and who I'm trying to become. Reading back through entries from even a month ago shows me how far I've come. I used to write the same things over and over, circling the same thoughts without any real insight. Now I can see patterns emerging and catch myself before I fall into old habits. The journal is evidence that I'm changing, even when it doesn't feel like it. Arno asks me over drinks one evening if I'm ready to date again. I think about it for a long time before answering. The truth is, I'm not ready. Not yet. I need more time being comfortable alone before I risk falling into old patterns with someone new. For the first time in my adult life, I'm choosing to be single intentionally, rather than treating it as a gap between relationships. Every relationship I've ever had was about filling some emptiness inside me, about defining myself through someone else's love or attention. I need to figure out who I am on my own before I try to be part of someone else's life. Arno nods and says that's probably the healthiest thing I've ever said about relationships. I see on social media that Daniel got engaged to the woman I saw him with at the grocery store. A mutual friend shares the announcement, and suddenly it's right there on my screen. Daniel smiling bigger than I've seen in years, his arm around a woman who looks at him like he hung the moon. The news hits harder than I expected, even though I knew he'd moved on. I let myself grieve for a full day, crying on my couch and looking at old photos and feeling the weight of everything I threw away. But then I get up and wash my face and send Daniel a message congratulating him. I tell him genuinely that I wish him happiness because he deserves everything I couldn't give him. I don't expect a response and I don't get one, but sending it feels like the right thing to do. Charlotte asks at our next session how I'm feeling about Daniel's engagement. I'm able to say honestly that I'm sad for what I lost, but happy he found someone who appreciates him. The ability to hold both feelings at once feels like real emotional maturity, instead of the black and white thinking I used to do. Before, I would have been either completely devastated or pretending I didn't care at all. Now I can be sad for myself while also being genuinely glad that Daniel is happy. Charlotte says that's growth, that being able to hold complexity and contradiction is a sign of developing emotional intelligence. I wake up the morning after seeing the engagement announcement to a text from Heloise. Her message says she knows the news must be hard for me even though I'm doing better, and she wants me to know she's seen real change in me over these past months. She writes that she's proud of the work I'm doing, and she's rooting for me to find my own happiness. I sit on my bed holding my phone and cry, but this time the tears feel different. Less about what I lost and more about being seen by someone who has every reason to hate me. Her kindness feels like more than I deserve, but I'm trying to learn how to accept grace when it's offered, instead of pushing it away because I think I don't deserve it. I text her back thanking her for everything she's done for me and telling her I'm genuinely happy for Daniel. I mean it when I type the words, which feels like proof that I'm actually changing instead of just saying I am. The weeks pass and I settle deeper into my new life, the one I'm building on my own without using another person as a foundation. My apartment stays clean because I want it that way, not because someone else expects it. I cook meals for myself and actually enjoy the process instead of rushing through it. I read books in the evening and don't feel guilty about the quiet. The farmer's market on Saturday mornings becomes my routine again, and I realize I never actually hated these things. I just hated myself and blamed it on my circumstances. I meet Arno for coffee every Tuesday and we talk about real things, not just surface-level complaints or gossip. He introduces me to his sister and we become friends, and I'm building a social circle based on actual connection, instead of just filling time between relationships. Some days I still wake up and feel the weight of everything I threw away pressing down on my chest. I let myself feel it instead of running from it or trying to fix it with someone new. I write in my journal about missing Daniel and the life we had, but I also write about understanding why I couldn't appreciate it then, and how I'm different now. The grief doesn't go away, but it becomes something I can carry instead of something that carries me. I sit down one evening and write Daniel a final letter, the one I actually plan to send this time. I tell him I saw his engagement announcement and I'm truly happy for him, not in a bitter or sarcastic way, but with genuine warmth for someone who deserves every good thing. I thank him for the 6 years we spent together, and for loving me as completely as he did even when I made it nearly impossible. I apologize for the pain I caused without making excuses or trying to explain away my choices. I don't ask him to forgive me or to respond or to give me anything at all. I just want him to know that I finally understand what I had and what I destroyed, and I'm grateful he found someone who can appreciate him the way he deserves. I read it over 3 times to make sure I'm not asking for anything disguised as giving closure. Then I send it before I can talk myself out of it. 2 weeks go by without a response and I tell myself that's okay, that I sent the letter for him, not for me. Then one morning I wake up to an email from Daniel. It's short, just a few lines, but every word feels carefully chosen. He writes that he appreciates what I said, and he's glad I'm doing better. He says he hopes I find the peace and happiness I was searching for, and he means that genuinely. He doesn't say he forgives me, and he doesn't say we can be friends, and he doesn't open a door to anything more than this single exchange. It's not the reconciliation some part of me still secretly hoped for, and it's not the complete absolution that would make me feel better about myself, but it's closure given with kindness, and it's grace from someone I hurt deeply, and I'm learning that sometimes that's enough. I can move forward now carrying the hard lessons I've learned and the self-awareness I've fought to build, and I can hope that the person I'm becoming is someone who won't make the same mistakes again. The story of my marriage is over, and I can't change how it ended, but the story of who I am is still being written, and for the first time, I'm the one holding the pen.